The morning sun rose over the small village of Millbrook, and 12-year-old Marcus woke up to the sound of birds singing outside his window. He rubbed his eyes and stretched his arms, feeling excited because today was a very special day. His grandmother had promised to tell him a secret that she had kept hidden for many years, and Marcus could not wait to hear what it was. He jumped out of bed and ran downstairs where his grandmother sat in her old wooden chair by the fireplace. She was a kind woman with silver hair and warm brown eyes that always seemed to sparkle when she smiled. "Good morning, Grandma," Marcus said as he gave her a big hug. "Good morning, my dear boy," she replied with a gentle smile on her face. "Are you ready to hear the story I promised to tell you?" Marcus nodded his head quickly and sat down on the floor next to her chair. He had been waiting for this moment for a whole week, and his heart was beating fast with excitement. His grandmother took a deep breath and began to speak in a soft voice. "Many years ago, when I was just a young girl like you are a young boy now, I discovered something amazing in the forest behind our village. It was a hidden valley that nobody else knew about, and it was the most beautiful place I had ever seen." Marcus listened with wide eyes as his grandmother continued her story. She told him about tall trees with golden leaves, a crystal-clear river that sang as it flowed over smooth stones, and flowers of every color that grew along the banks. "But that was not the most special thing about the valley," his grandmother said with a mysterious look in her eyes. "The valley was home to creatures that most people believe only exist in fairy tales and old legends." "What kind of creatures?" Marcus asked, leaning forward with curiosity burning inside him. His grandmother smiled and reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small silver key that glowed faintly in the morning light. "This key will show you the way to the hidden valley, Marcus. I am giving it to you because I am too old to make the journey now, and someone must protect the secret." Marcus took the key in his trembling hands and felt a strange warmth spread through his fingers. The key seemed to hum with energy, and for a moment he thought he saw tiny sparks of light dancing around it. "You must be very careful," his grandmother warned him. "Not everyone should know about the hidden valley. There are people who would want to harm the creatures that live there, and you must never let that happen." Marcus promised his grandmother that he would keep the secret safe and protect the valley with all his heart. She smiled and told him that she knew he would make her proud. After eating a quick breakfast of bread and honey, Marcus put on his boots and grabbed his jacket. He placed the silver key in his pocket and headed toward the door, ready to begin his adventure. "Remember," his grandmother called after him, "follow the key. It will guide you when you feel lost." Marcus waved goodbye and stepped outside into the bright morning sunshine. The air smelled fresh and clean, and he could hear the distant sound of the river that ran through the village. He walked past the old church and the bakery, where Mrs. Thompson was already making her famous apple pies. The forest stood at the edge of the village, tall and dark and full of mystery. Marcus had played in the outer parts of the forest many times before, but he had never gone deep inside, where the ancient trees grew thick and close together. As he entered the forest, the light grew dimmer, and the sounds of the village faded away. He could hear birds calling to each other high up in the branches, and small animals rustled through the leaves on the ground. Marcus walked for what felt like hours, climbing over fallen logs and pushing through bushes covered with berries. Several times he thought he was lost, but then he remembered what his grandmother had said about the key. He pulled the silver key from his pocket and held it up in front of him. At first, nothing happened, but then the key began to glow, brighter and brighter. It seemed to pull gently in one direction, like a compass pointing towards something hidden in the depths of the forest. Marcus followed where the key led him, and soon he came to a part of the forest that looked different from anywhere he had been before. The trees here were much older, with trunks so wide that 10 people holding hands could not wrap their arms around them. Strange mushrooms grew at their bases, glowing softly with pale blue and green light. He heard the sound of water up ahead and quickened his pace. The key was glowing so brightly now that it was almost difficult to look at, and Marcus knew he must be getting close to the hidden valley. Suddenly the trees parted, and Marcus found himself standing at the edge of a cliff. Below him stretched the most beautiful sight he had ever seen in all his young life. The hidden valley spread out before him like a painting come to life. Green meadows dotted with colorful flowers rolled down to a shimmering river that wound its way through the center of the valley. Waterfalls tumbled down from rocky cliffs on the far side, creating rainbows in the misty air. But what made Marcus gasp out loud were the creatures he saw moving through the valley below. There were deer with antlers that sparkled like diamonds, birds with feathers of pure gold, and in the distance he could see something large and magnificent drinking from the river. Was that a unicorn? Marcus could not believe his eyes. Everything his grandmother had told him was true, and now he was about to enter a world that most people only dreamed about. He looked down at the silver key in his hand and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma." Now he just needed to find a way down into the valley, and his real adventure would begin. Marcus stood at the edge of the cliff, looking down at the magical valley below him. His heart raced with excitement as he searched for a path that would take him down to the meadows and the sparkling river. After walking along the cliff edge for several minutes, he spotted a narrow trail that zigzagged down the rocky face. It looked dangerous, but Marcus was determined to reach the valley no matter what. He took a deep breath and began his descent, placing his feet carefully on the loose stones and grabbing onto roots that stuck out from the rock. The wind blew against him, making his jacket flutter, and he tried not to look down at the long drop below. Step by step he made his way lower and lower, until finally his feet touched the soft grass at the bottom of the cliff. He had made it. Marcus looked around in wonder at the beautiful landscape that surrounded him. The grass beneath his feet was the brightest green he had ever seen, and tiny flowers in shades of purple and pink grew everywhere. Butterflies with wings that shimmered like jewels flew from bloom to bloom, and the air smelled sweeter than any perfume. He began walking toward the river, his eyes wide open and his ears listening carefully for any sound. The silver key in his pocket had stopped glowing now, as if it knew its job was done. As he walked through the meadow, Marcus noticed that some of the flowers turned to face him as he passed. They seemed almost alive, watching him with curiosity. He bent down to look more closely at one of them, and was amazed to see that it had a tiny face hidden among its petals. "Hello there," Marcus whispered softly. The flower made a tiny squeaking sound, and its petals blushed from pink to red. Then all the flowers around it began to squeak too, creating a cheerful chorus that sounded almost like laughter. Marcus laughed along with them and continued on his way toward the river. The sound of rushing water grew louder as he approached, and soon he could see the crystal-clear current flowing over smooth, colorful stones. He knelt down at the water's edge and dipped his hand into the cool stream. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and Marcus could see fish with scales of silver and gold swimming just below the surface. They looked up at him with curious eyes before darting away into the deeper parts of the river. "You must be the new guardian," a voice said from behind him. Marcus spun around in surprise and found himself face to face with the most extraordinary creature he had ever seen. Standing before him was a fox, but not an ordinary fox. This fox had fur that seemed to shift between different shades of orange and red, like flames dancing in a fireplace, and its eyes were a deep and intelligent amber color. "Did you just speak to me?" Marcus asked in amazement. The fox tilted its head and smiled in a way that only magical creatures can smile. "Of course I spoke to you. All the creatures in this valley can speak, though we do not often have visitors to talk with." Marcus sat down on the grass, his legs feeling weak from the shock. "I am Marcus," he said. My grandmother gave me a key that led me here. She said I need to protect this place. The fox nodded its beautiful head slowly. Ah, yes. We have been waiting for you. Your grandmother was a dear friend to all of us when she was young. She used to come here often and play with us in the meadows. We were very sad when she grew too old to make the journey. She told me about this place, but I never imagined it would be so amazing, Marcus exclaimed. My name is Ember, the fox said, sitting down across from Marcus. I am one of the elders of this valley, and it is my duty to welcome you and teach you about our world. Marcus listened eagerly as Ember began to explain the history of the Hidden Valley. Long ago, when the world was young and magic was everywhere, all creatures lived together in peace. But as humans spread across the land and forgot about the old ways, the magical creatures had to hide themselves away to survive. This valley is protected by ancient magic, Ember continued. The silver key you carry is one of only 3 in the entire world, and it allows special humans, like you and your grandmother, to find us. Who has the other 2 keys? Marcus asked with curiosity. Ember's eyes grew sad. One key was lost many centuries ago, and we do not know what happened to it. The 3rd key belongs to someone we do not speak of, a man who once came to this valley with kindness in his heart, but left with darkness in his soul. Marcus wanted to ask more questions about this mysterious man, but suddenly he heard a loud sound coming from the other side of the valley. It was like thunder, but the sky was clear and blue. Ember jumped to her feet, her fiery fur standing up along her back. Something is wrong, she growled. That sound came from the eastern border. Without another word, Ember took off running across the meadow, her paws barely touching the ground. Marcus scrambled to his feet and chased after her, his heart pounding with fear and excitement. As they ran, other creatures began to appear from the forest and the meadows, all moving in the same direction. Marcus saw rabbits with antlers, birds made entirely of light, and even a great stag with a coat of midnight blue. They reached the eastern edge of the valley, where a tall wall of shimmering energy rose up from the ground to the sky. This must be the magical barrier that Ember had mentioned, the one that kept the valley hidden from the outside world. But something was terribly wrong. A large crack had appeared in the barrier, spreading outward like a spider web. Through the crack, Marcus could see the dark forest outside, and standing at the edge of it was a figure dressed all in black. The figure held something in his hand that glowed with a sickly green light, and he was pointing it at the barrier. With each pulse of green light, the crack grew larger and larger. It cannot be, Ember whispered in horror. He has found us at last. Who is that? Marcus asked, his voice trembling. Ember turned to him with fear in her amber eyes. That is the man I told you about, the one who carries the 3rd key. His name is Victor Shade, and he has spent his entire life searching for a way to break through our barriers. Marcus watched as the crack continued to spread. What does he want? Marcus asked. He wants our magic, Ember replied grimly. He believes that if he can capture us and take our power, he will become immortal. We must stop him, or everything we have protected for thousands of years will be lost. Marcus felt afraid, but he also felt something else rising up inside him. He was the guardian now, and he would not let this evil man destroy the beautiful valley and its magical inhabitants. He pulled the silver key from his pocket and held it tightly in his hand. Tell me what I need to do, he said to Ember with determination in his voice. The magical fox looked at him and nodded slowly. Then your training must begin immediately, young guardian. We have very little time. The next few days were the most intense of Marcus's young life. Ember and the other creatures of the valley worked together to teach him everything he needed to know about magic and the ancient powers that protected their home. Each morning before the sun rose, Marcus would wake up in a small cave that the creatures had prepared for him. The cave was warm and comfortable, with walls that glowed softly with golden light, and a bed made of the softest moss he had ever felt. His first lesson was about the silver key and its true power. Ember explained that the key was not just a tool to find the valley, but also a source of great magic that could be used to strengthen the barrier or to heal creatures who were sick or injured. The key responds to the heart of whoever holds it, Ember told him as they sat by the river. If your heart is pure and your intentions are good, the key will share its power with you. But if you ever use it for selfish reasons, the magic will fade and never return. Marcus practiced holding the key and focusing his thoughts on good things. He thought about his grandmother and how much he loved her. He thought about the beautiful valley and all the amazing creatures who live there. He thought about how much he wanted to protect them from Victor Shade. Slowly, he began to feel the key grow warm in his hand, and a gentle light started to flow from it into his body. It felt like sunshine spreading through his veins, filling him with strength and courage. "Excellent," Ember exclaimed with pride. "You are learning faster than anyone I have ever taught." But learning to use the key was only the beginning. Marcus also had to learn about the different creatures of the valley and their special abilities. Each one had unique powers that could help in the fight against Victor Shade. The golden birds could create blinding flashes of light that would confuse any enemy. The blue stag could run faster than the wind and could carry messages across great distances in mere moments. The antlered rabbits could dig tunnels underground that stretched for miles, perfect for escaping from danger or launching surprise attacks. And then there was the unicorn that Marcus had seen from the cliff on his first day. Her name was Luna, and she was the oldest and wisest creature in the entire valley. Her horn held the most powerful magic of all, and she was the one who had created the barrier that protected the valley thousands of years ago. Marcus felt nervous when Ember took him to meet Luna. The unicorn stood in a clearing, surrounded by ancient trees, her white coat gleaming like fresh snow, and her silver mane flowing in a breeze that seemed to come from nowhere. "So you are the new guardian," Luna said, in a voice that sounded like music. "Come closer, child. Let me see you properly." Marcus walked forward slowly, his legs shaking just a little. Luna lowered her great head and looked into his eyes, and for a moment Marcus felt as if she could see everything about him, every thought and every feeling he had ever had. "You have a good heart," Luna finally said. "I can sense the love you have for your grandmother, and the courage that burns inside you. But I must warn you that the path ahead will not be easy." "I am ready to do whatever it takes," Marcus replied bravely. Luna nodded her magnificent head. "Victor Shade is more dangerous than you can imagine. He was once a kind man who loved nature and all living things. But his desire for power corrupted him, and now he will stop at nothing to achieve his goals." She told Marcus the story of how Victor had first discovered the valley many years ago. He had been given a silver key by a dying wizard who saw the goodness in his heart. Victor had visited the valley often and had made friends with many of the creatures. But one day, Victor discovered that he was getting old. He became afraid of death and begged the creatures to share their magic with him so he could live forever. When they refused, explaining that such magic was not meant for humans, Victor became angry and left the valley, swearing that he would return and take what he wanted by force. He has spent decades studying dark magic and building terrible weapons, Luna explained sadly. The device he uses to attack our barrier was created from stolen magical energy. Each time it strikes our defenses, a piece of our protection crumbles away. Marcus felt his determination grow stronger. "How do we stop him?" Luna replied. "The only way to stop Victor is to take back the key he carries. Without the key, he cannot find the entrance to our valley, and his weapons will lose their connection to our magic." "Then that is what I will do," Marcus declared. Luna smiled gently. Your courage is admirable, young guardian, but you cannot face Victor alone. You will need help from friends both inside and outside the valley. Marcus thought about her words as he walked back through the meadows with Ember at his side. Friends outside the valley meant people from his village, but who would believe him if he told them about magical creatures and evil villains? Then he remembered his best friend, a girl named Sophie, who lived next door to his grandmother's house. Sophie had always believed in magic, even when other children made fun of her for it. She read books about fairies and dragons, and always said that somewhere in the world these things must be real. I need to go back to the village, Marcus told Ember. There is someone I must bring here, someone who can help us. Ember looked worried. Are you sure that is wise? The more people who know about our valley, the greater the risk that our secret will be discovered. I trust Sophie with my life, Marcus said firmly. She would never betray us. After much discussion, Ember and the other creatures agreed to let Marcus return to the village and bring back his friend. But they warned him to be careful, because Victor Shade had spies everywhere, watching and waiting for any opportunity to learn more about the valley. Marcus left early the next morning, climbing back up the cliff path and making his way through the dark forest. The silver key guided him just as it had before, and by midday he could see the familiar rooftops of Millbrook through the trees. He crept through the village quietly, not wanting to attract attention. When he reached Sophie's house, he threw a small pebble at her window, the secret signal they had always used when they wanted to meet in private. A moment later, Sophie's face appeared at the window, her red hair shining in the sunlight and her green eyes wide with curiosity. She opened the window and whispered down to him, "Marcus, where have you been? Everyone has been looking for you for 3 days." Marcus felt a jolt of surprise. Had he really been gone that long? Time must move differently in the magical valley. "I cannot explain everything now," he whispered back, "but I need your help. Can you meet me at the old oak tree in 1 hour?" Sophie nodded without hesitation. "I will be there." Marcus smiled and slipped away into the shadows. In 1 hour, he would have an ally in his fight against Victor Shade. Together they would save the hidden valley and all its wonderful inhabitants. But what Marcus did not know was that someone had been watching him from the darkness between two houses. A tall figure in a black coat stepped out of the shadows, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Victor Shade had finally found what he was looking for. Marcus waited by the old oak tree at the edge of the village, his heart beating with both excitement and worry. The ancient tree had stood in this spot for hundreds of years, and he and Sophie had played here since they were very small children. When Sophie arrived, she was carrying a backpack stuffed with supplies. She had packed food, water, a flashlight, and even a book about magical creatures that she had borrowed from the library years ago and never returned. "I knew this day would come," Sophie said with a bright smile. "I always knew that magic was real, and now you are going to prove it to me." Marcus quickly told her everything that had happened since he left the village. He told her about his grandmother's secret, the silver key, the hidden valley, and all the amazing creatures who lived there. He told her about Victor Shade and the danger that threatened to destroy everything. Sophie listened without interrupting, her eyes growing wider with each new detail. When Marcus finished, she took a deep breath and grabbed his hand. "What are we waiting for?" she asked. "Let us go save that valley." The two friends set off into the forest, following the gentle pull of the silver key. Sophie gasped in wonder as they entered the deeper parts of the woods, where the ancient trees grew and the glowing mushrooms lit the way. But as they walked, Marcus began to feel uneasy. Something felt different about the forest, as if the shadows were watching them with unfriendly eyes. The birds had stopped singing, and an unnatural silence had fallen over everything. "Do you feel that?" Sophie whispered nervously. Before Marcus could answer, a cold laugh echoed through the trees. They spun around to see Victor Shade stepping out from behind a massive oak, his black coat swirling around him like smoke. "Thank you for leading me to the valley, young guardian," Victor said with a wicked grin. "I have waited so long for this moment." Marcus pushed Sophie behind him and held up the silver key. "Stay away from us." Victor laughed again. "That little trinket cannot hurt me. I have spent decades learning to protect myself from its power. Now hand it over, and perhaps I will let you and your friend go free." "Never!" Marcus shouted bravely. Victor's smile disappeared, replaced by a look of cold anger. "Then you leave me no choice." He raised his hand, and green lightning crackled from his fingertips. The bolts shot toward Marcus and Sophie, but at the last moment, the silver key blazed with brilliant light. The lightning struck an invisible shield and scattered harmlessly into the trees. Victor looked surprised for just a second, before his face twisted with rage. "Impressive, but you cannot keep that up forever." He began hurling bolt after bolt of green lightning at them, each one stronger than the last. Marcus felt the power of the key draining with every attack he blocked, and he knew that Victor was right. He could not hold out much longer. "Run!" Marcus yelled to Sophie. "Get to the valley and warn the others." "I am not leaving you," Sophie cried. Just when Marcus thought all was lost, a streak of orange and red came flying out of the forest. Ember leaped through the air and landed between Marcus and Victor, her fiery fur blazing brightly. "You dare to attack a guardian?" Ember growled at Victor. "You will pay for this betrayal." Victor took a step back, actual fear flickering in his eyes. "So the creatures have finally come out to fight." "It matters not. My power has grown far beyond what you remember." More creatures emerged from the forest to stand beside Ember. The golden birds circled overhead, ready to blind Victor with their light. The antlered rabbits burst from tunnels in the ground, their small but fierce eyes fixed on the enemy. And from the shadows came the great blue stag, his antlers lowered and ready to charge. Victor looked around at the army of magical creatures surrounding him, and for a moment it seemed like he might surrender. But then his cruel smile returned, and he reached into his coat and pulled out a small black orb. "Did you really think I came unprepared?" he asked mockingly. He smashed the orb on the ground, and a wave of darkness exploded outward. The magical creatures cried out in pain as the shadow touched them, and one by one they collapsed to the forest floor. "No!" Marcus screamed. The darkness washed over him too, and he felt an icy coldness seeping into his bones. The silver key flickered and dimmed, and Marcus fell to his knees, struggling to stay conscious. Victor walked toward him slowly, savoring his victory. "The shadow orb drains magical energy," he explained. "Everything it touches becomes weak and helpless. Now give me the key, boy." Marcus tried to hold on to the key, but his fingers would not obey him. Victor reached down and plucked it from his hand with a triumphant laugh. "Finally," Victor exclaimed, "after all these years, I have the power I need. Soon I will break down the barrier completely and take the magic of every creature in that valley." He turned and began walking deeper into the forest, toward the hidden valley. Marcus watched helplessly, tears streaming down his face. He had failed everyone, his grandmother, Ember, Luna, and all the beautiful creatures who had trusted him to protect them. But then he heard something, a small voice calling his name. He turned his head and saw Sophie crawling toward him. The shadow had not affected her as strongly, because she had no magic of her own. "Marcus," she whispered urgently, "the book, my book about magical creatures." She pulled the worn book from her backpack and flipped through the pages with shaking hands. "I read about shadow magic years ago. There is a way to break its power. Marcus forced himself to focus. How? Light, Sophie said. Pure light from a willing heart. The shadow feeds on magic, but it cannot survive true light. Marcus thought about her words. He had no magic of his own, now that Victor had taken the key. But Sophie said the light had to come from a willing heart. Maybe magic was not the only kind of power in the world. He closed his eyes and thought about all the good things in his life. He thought about his grandmother's warm smile, about Sophie's friendship, about the laughter of the flower creatures in the meadow. He thought about love and kindness and hope. Deep inside his chest, he felt something begin to glow. It was small at first, just a tiny spark, but it grew stronger and brighter as he focused on it. This was not the magic of the silver key. This was something else entirely, something that came from within him. Marcus opened his eyes, and golden light burst from his body. It swept across the forest floor, washing away the darkness, like water washing away dirt. The magical creatures began to stir, their strength returning as the shadow's grip released them. Ember lifted her head and looked at Marcus with amazement in her amber eyes. How is this possible? You have no magical bloodline. Marcus stood up, still glowing with inner light. Sophie taught me that magic is not the only power in the world. Love and friendship are stronger than any shadow. He helped Sophie to her feet, and together they began running toward the hidden valley. They had to stop Victor before he could break down the barrier. Behind them, the magical creatures were recovering quickly, shaking off the last effects of the shadow magic. Ember bounded alongside Marcus, her fiery fur blazing brighter than ever. Victor does not know that you have this power, she said. We can use that to our advantage. Marcus nodded grimly. The final battle was about to begin, and everything depended on a 12-year-old boy who had just discovered a power no one knew he possessed. Ahead of them, the trees began to thin, and Marcus could see the shimmer of the valley's barrier in the distance. Victor Shade was already there, using the stolen silver key to tear open a massive hole in the magical wall. There was no time to waste. Marcus burst through the edge of the forest and saw Victor Shade standing before the magical barrier. The silver key in Victor's hand was shooting beams of corrupted green energy at the shimmering wall, and the hole was growing larger with every passing second. Stop, Marcus shouted. Victor turned around, and his eyes widened with shock. Impossible. The shadow should have kept you down for hours. You forgot about the power of friendship, Marcus replied, standing tall with Sophie beside him and the magical creatures gathering at his back. Victor sneered and turned back to his work. It matters not. In moments, the barrier will fall, and nothing you can do will stop me. Marcus knew he had to act fast. He ran forward, summoning the golden light from within his heart. The warmth spread through his body as he thought about everyone counting on him. Victor heard him coming and spun around, firing a bolt of green lightning. But Marcus was ready this time. The golden light flowing from his hands met the lightning in midair, and the two forces crashed together with a sound like thunder. What is this power? Victor demanded, his face twisted with confusion and anger. It is called love, Marcus answered. It is the one thing you gave up when you chose darkness over friendship. The two forces struggled against each other, neither one able to overcome the other. Marcus felt the strain pulling at every muscle in his body, but he refused to give up. He thought about his grandmother believing in him, about Sophie standing bravely by his side, about Ember and Luna, and all the creatures who had shown him kindness. Sophie ran to stand beside him, and even though she had no magic, she put her hand on his shoulder. You can do this, Marcus. I believe in you. Her words sent a surge of strength through him. The golden light blazed brighter, pushing against Victor's green lightning. Ember joined them, pressing her warm body against Marcus's leg. The entire valley believes in you, young guardian. One by one, the magical creatures gathered around Marcus. The golden birds landed on his shoulders, the antlered rabbits pressed against his feet, and the great blue stag stood proudly beside him. Each one added their faith and their love to his power. And then Luna appeared. The unicorn walked through the hole in the barrier, her white coat gleaming and her silver horn shining like a star. She looked at Victor with sadness in her ancient eyes. "Victor," she said gently, "this is not who you were meant to be. Do you remember the young man who first came to our valley? The one who laughed with the flower creatures and swam in the river with the golden fish? That Victor was full of joy and wonder." For just a moment, something flickered in Victor's eyes. It looked almost like regret. "That man was weak," Victor growled, but his voice wavered. He was afraid of death. Luna replied softly, "All living things must one day pass, but the love we share lives on forever. The creatures you befriended still remember you. They have never stopped hoping that you would return to the light." Victor's lightning began to weaken. Tears were forming in the corners of his eyes as memories of happier times flooded through his mind. He remembered playing in the meadows, listening to the songs of the birds, and falling asleep under the stars, with magical creatures watching over him. "I was so scared," Victor whispered. "I did not want to lose all of that." Marcus lowered his hands, and the golden light faded to a gentle glow. "You do not have to be scared anymore. Everyone makes mistakes, but it is never too late to make things right." The green lightning disappeared completely, and Victor fell to his knees. The silver key dropped from his hand and rolled across the grass toward Marcus. Victor covered his face with his hands and began to cry. "I am so sorry," he sobbed. "I am so terribly sorry for everything I have done." Luna walked over to Victor and touched her horn gently to the top of his head. A soft silver light surrounded him, and the darkness that had corrupted him for so many years began to lift like morning fog burned away by the sun. "Your crimes cannot be erased," Luna said kindly, "but you can begin to make amends. Will you help us repair the damage you have caused?" Victor looked up at her with clear eyes for the first time in decades. "Yes, I will spend the rest of my life making things right." Marcus picked up the silver key and felt its warmth flow through him once again. He walked over to the damaged barrier and held the key up against the magical wall. Golden light mixed with silver as the key and his inner power worked together to seal the hole. Within minutes, the barrier was whole again, stronger than ever before. The magical creatures cheered, and the flower faces in the meadow sang a joyful song that echoed across the entire valley. Sophie hugged Marcus tightly. "You did it! You saved everyone!" Ember rubbed her fiery head against his leg. "You are truly a worthy guardian, perhaps the worthiest we have ever had." Marcus felt overwhelmed with happiness, but there was still one thing he needed to do. He said goodbye to his friends and promised to return very soon, then made his way back through the forest to the village. His grandmother was sitting in her chair by the fireplace when he burst through the door. Her face lit up with joy when she saw him. "I knew you could do it," she said, opening her arms for a hug. Marcus ran to her and held her tightly. "I met Ember and Luna. I saw the golden birds and the flower creatures. It was even more amazing than you described." His grandmother smiled and wiped a tear from her eye. "I am so proud of you, Marcus. You have become everything I hoped you would be." They sat together by the fire as Marcus told her about all his adventures. He told her about learning to use the key, about Sophie joining the quest, and about how love had defeated the darkness in Victor's heart. "The valley is safe now," Marcus said, "and Victor is going to help fix everything he broke." "That is the best ending I could have imagined," his grandmother replied. "People can always change if they are given the chance. In the weeks that followed, Marcus visited the Hidden Valley many times, often bringing Sophie with him. They helped Ember teach the younger creatures about the outside world, swam in the Crystal River with Luna, and spent long afternoons playing with the flower creatures in the meadows. Victor worked hard to repair all the damage he had caused. He used his knowledge of dark magic to strengthen the barrier against future attacks, and slowly the magical creatures began to trust him again. Sometimes Marcus would find Victor sitting quietly by the river, a peaceful smile on his face as he watched the golden fish swim by. And every night, before Marcus went to sleep, he would hold the silver key in his hands and feel the warmth of its magic mixing with the light that glowed in his own heart. He knew that as long as he stayed true to himself and remembered the power of love and friendship, he would be able to protect the Hidden Valley forever. One evening, as the sun set over Millbrook in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Marcus stood at the edge of the forest and looked toward the distant mountains where the valley lay hidden. Sophie stood beside him, her red hair glowing in the fading light. "Do you ever wonder what other magical places might be out there?" Marcus smiled and squeezed her hand. "I think the world is full of magic. We just have to know where to look." The silver key hummed softly in his pocket, as if agreeing with him. And somewhere in the Hidden Valley, a unicorn lifted her head and smiled, knowing that the future was in good hands. This was not the end of Marcus's adventures. It was only the beginning. For in a world where magic is real and love conquers all, there are always new mysteries to uncover, new friends to make, and new wonders waiting just around the corner. And Marcus, the boy who discovered that the greatest power comes not from magical keys or ancient spells, but from the heart itself, was ready for whatever came next.